In 1587, a man named Miguel Ferrer lasted 6 days while guards systematically shredded, but that's not even the worst part. It's not even the worst part. The device they used had the most innocent name in torture history, the Spanish tickler. Guards would joke about it, laugh about it, tell prisoners they were just going to get tickled, and then they'd drag 4 iron claws down your back, ripping through skin, muscle, and tendon like you were made of wet paper. Here's what makes this truly horrifying. It wasn't designed to kill you quickly. The infection was. And historians have spent centuries hiding just how common this practice actually was. By the end of this video, you'll understand 3 things that history books deliberately left out. First, why this gentle name concealed the most prolonged execution method ever documented. Second, the specific medical horror that guaranteed your death would take days, not hours. And third, the 6-day ordeal that finally forced European courts to ban this nightmare. If you want to see what they don't teach you in school, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what I'm about to show, you never made it into any textbook. Let me take you back to a time when the worst thing that could happen to you had the friendliest name imaginable. Most people think the Spanish tickler was just another tool of the Spanish Inquisition. They're wrong. This device predates the Inquisition by at least 2 centuries. We're talking about a torture method that was already old when Columbus set sail for the Americas. Here's what you need to understand about medieval torture. Most of it was designed to kill you fast. The breaking wheel shattered your bones in minutes. The rack dislocated your joints within an hour. Even burning at the stake was relatively quick once the smoke suffocated you. But the Spanish tickler? That was engineered for something completely different. This wasn't about execution. This was about duration, maximum conscious suffering over the longest possible time frame. And the truly diabolical part? You stayed completely aware the entire time. No unconsciousness, no shock-induced mercy, just you, your shredded flesh, and the knowledge that death was still days away. The first official documentation appears in Jos Damhouder's 1554 manual, Practis Ram Criminalis, essentially a how-to guide for executioners. But even Damhoud admits the practice was already traditional by then. We're talking about a torture method so old, so established, that it had regional variations across Europe. French versions had curved prongs, German models featured serrated edges, Italian variants included small hooks at the tips. Each modification designed to maximize one thing: the time between the first stroke and your last breath. But here's what nobody tells you about the Spanish tickler. The design itself wasn't what made this torture so effective. It was a medical principle that medieval executioners discovered entirely by accident. And once they figured it out, they perfected it into a science. Imagine you're a medieval blacksmith, and the local magistrate commissions you to create a torture device. Your instinct says, make it sharp, right? Pierce the skin quickly, cause maximum pain immediately. Wrong. The Spanish tickler's prongs were deliberately kept dull, not blunt dull. There's a crucial difference. A blunt object crushes tissue, but a dull rake, that tears it slowly, irregularly, creating jagged wounds that maximize surface area damage while keeping the victim conscious. This is a genuine Spanish tickler from the Rothenburg Medieval Crime Museum in Germany. Notice the prong tips. They're not needle-sharp, they're rough, almost corroded looking. That's intentional. Those rough edges catch on muscle fibers, on tendons, on the fascial tissue that holds your body together. When a guard dragged this down your back, it didn't slice cleanly, it shredded. Let me walk you through exactly what happened. First stroke removes the epidermis, your outer skin layer. You're bleeding, but it's not deep. Second stroke tears into the dermis, where your nerve endings concentrate. Now you're screaming. Third stroke reaches subcutaneous fat and muscle tissue. Now you're begging. Damhoud's manual is disturbingly specific about technique. Guards were instructed to use firm, steady pressure with parallel strokes approximately 2 fingers width apart. They weren't randomly clawing at you. This was methodical, systematic, designed to cover maximum surface area while keeping you alive. Standard procedure called for 12 strokes across the back. Then they'd flip you over for 12 across the chest. 24 total wounds, each one approximately 6 inches long, each one tearing through multiple tissue layers. But here's the truly calculated part. The 4 prongs were spaced exactly 1 centimeter apart. Why? Because that spacing prevented the wounds from merging into single large lacerations. Instead, you got dozens of separate wound channels, separate sites for blood loss, separate entry points for what came next. And what came next is what actually killed you. Because the metal, the physical trauma, that was just the delivery system. The real weapon was invisible, microscopic, and in the 16th century, they didn't even know it existed. Don't click away yet, because the medical reality of the Spanish tickler is somehow worse than the device. Picture the environment where this torture happened. Stone dungeons, no ventilation, human waste in the corners, rats everywhere, and those iron claws? They were never cleaned. Ever. Every time a guard dragged that Spanish tickler across someone's flesh, they were inoculating dozens of wound channels with bacteria. Staphylococcus, streptococcus, clostridium. Medieval torture chambers were bacterial theme parks. But here's what nobody tells you. Executioners knew this. They didn't understand germ theory. That wouldn't come for another 300 years. But they knew that wounds from the tickle killed differently than wounds from clean blades. Dr. Jan Wehr, a German physician who examined torture victims in the 1590s, documented something he called dungeon fever. His notes, preserved in the Freiburg archives, describe victims who survived the initial torture only to develop malodorous wounds, corrupted flesh, and mortification spreading from the lacerations. He was describing sepsis. Here's the 3-stage nightmare that every Spanish tickler victim experienced. Stage 1. Hours 0 to 12. Inflammatory response. Your body attempts to seal the wounds. You're in agony, but you're stable. Guards would often leave you alone during this phase, letting you think you might survive. Stage 2. Hours 12 to 48. Bacterial colonization. The wounds begin festering. You develop fever, chills, confusion. This is when the screaming starts again, even though nobody's touching you anymore. Your own body is destroying itself from the inside. Stage 3, hours 48 to death. Systemic infection. Your blood becomes poisoned. You develop what we are called spots of mortification. We call it necrotizing fasciitis, flesh-eating disease. Your tissue literally rots while you're still alive. And here's the truly horrifying detail we are documented. Victims remained conscious through stage 3. You could watch your own flesh turn black, smell yourself decomposing, feel the tissue dying around the wound sites. Average time from torture to death, 4 to 6 days. But wait, doctors found something even worse in those Freiburg records. Certain body parts, when targeted, guaranteed faster infection rates. The back, chest, and arms, 4 to 6 days. But there was one area that killed in just 48 hours. And executioners learned to save that area for prisoners who knew valuable information, for people they needed to break quickly before infection made them delirious and useless for interrogation. The inner thighs and lower abdomen. Richest blood supply, closest to major organs, perfect bacterial highway to your heart and lungs. That brings us to Miguel Ferrer, the man who lasted 6 days, the man whose testimony would change torture law forever. But first, you need to understand what those 6 days actually looked like. Miguel Ferrer was accused of heresy on March 14, 1587. His crime? Questioning whether the Pope had divine authority to forgive sins. For this theological debate, the Barcelona Inquisition sentenced him to examination by claw. These are the actual records, not historians' interpretations, the original documents, and they contain a level of detail that's almost unbearable to read. Day 1, March 22, 1587. Guards administered the Spanish tickler at dawn. 12 strokes across his back, 12 across his chest. The examining physician noted Furrer remained fully conscious and responsive to interrogation throughout. He confessed to nothing. They left him chained in the cell. No medical treatment, no water for the first 6 hours. Day 2. The prison doctor examined Furrer's wounds. His notes described suppuration, pus formation, and elevated temperature of the body. Furrer developed fever. Guards questioned him again. He still confessed to nothing. Here's what makes this remarkable. Most victims broke by day 2. The combination of pain and fever typically shattered mental resistance, but Furrer had something the Inquisition didn't anticipate. He'd been a military surgeon before becoming a religious scholar. He understood exactly what was happening to his body, and he knew that anything he confessed would be used to arrest his family. Day 3 through 5, the documents become increasingly clinical and increasingly horrible. Furrer's wounds turned malodorous and discolored. He developed spots of mortification along his ribcage. His fever peaked at what the doctor estimated as extreme heat of the body. But he kept refusing to name accomplices, because there were no accomplices. Day 6, March 28, 1587. The Inquisition brought in a senior bishop to administer last rites, standard procedure when death was imminent. And that bishop, Father Tomar de Cordova, did something unexpected. He questioned the validity of the confession process. The Cordova's letter, preserved in the archives, argued that Furrer's refusal to confess after 6 days of suffering proved either innocence of spirit or corruption of the examination method itself. He went further. A guilty man would have spoken to end his suffering. This man's silence indicates either the strength of the righteous or the uselessness of our methods. Furrer died at sunset on day 6. His official cause of death, mortification of the flesh following examination. But his testimony, or rather his lack of testimony, did something no other torture victim had managed. It made the Inquisition question whether the Spanish tickler actually worked. And once they started asking that question, everything changed. Here's the twist nobody sees coming. The Spanish tickler wasn't banned because it was cruel. It was banned because it was useless. During the 30 Years' War, military tribunals across Europe used torture to extract information from prisoners. Enemy troop movements, supply routes, defensive positions, intelligence that could win battles. And the Spanish tickler was a favorite method until commanders noticed a pattern. Prisoners tortured with the tickler confessed to everything. And I mean everything. Troop movements that didn't exist, supply routes through impossible mountains, defensive positions in cities that hadn't been built yet. A 1643 memo from Swedish military command states information obtained through flesh rake examination has proven universally unreliable. Subjects confess to any detail suggested by interrogators, regardless of truth. The method produces only interrogator expectations, not actionable intelligence. They discovered what modern psychology wouldn't formally document for another 300 years. Extreme, prolonged torture makes people tell you what you want to hear, not what's true. Between 1640 and 1680, military tribunals across Europe quietly prohibited flesh rakes and clawed instruments. Not for humanitarian reasons. Read the documents carefully. The bans cite unreliability of intelligence gathered and corruption of testimony. They didn't care about the suffering. They cared about the useless confessions. But civilian courts, including the Inquisition, continued using the Spanish tickler for another 50 years. Why? Because they weren't seeking intelligence. They were seeking confessions for religious crimes. And for that purpose, false confessions worked just fine. If you confessed to heresy, you were guilty of heresy. Truth didn't matter. The final recorded use of the Spanish tickler occurred in 1734 in Rothenburg, Germany. A woman named Anna Schmid, accused of witchcraft, was examined by claw for 3 days before dying of infection. 2 years later, Prussia formally banned all torture devices that caused mortification of the flesh. Other German states followed.
By 1750, the Spanish tickler had effectively disappeared from legal use. Today you can see specimens in museums across Europe, clean, polished, displayed behind glass with sanitary little plaques that don't mention the infection, the prolonged death, the useless confessions. But here's what survived. The lesson military commanders learned in the 1640s, that extreme torture produces false information, that pain doesn't reveal truth, it creates whatever story ends the pain. That principle became codified in the Geneva Conventions. Article 3 specifically prohibits violence to life and person, in particular mutilation, language that directly references devices like the Spanish tickler. It took 400 years, thousands of deaths, and countless false confessions, but humanity finally learned what Miguel Ferrer proved in that Barcelona dungeon. Some things are worse than death, and the information you get from someone experiencing those things is worthless. I know this has been dark. If you're still watching, you clearly appreciate history's brutal truths as much as I do. Make sure you're subscribed, because next week I'm revealing the torture device that was so effective it was classified as a military secret for 200 years. And yes, it's worse than what you just learned about. But we're not done with the Spanish tickler yet. Conservative estimates put the death toll at 300 to 400 documented victims, but those are just the official records that survived. For every recorded torture session, historians estimate 3 to 5 undocumented cases. The real number is probably closer to 1,000 to 1,500 people who died from infection following examination by claw. Here's the thing that haunts me. Every single one of those deaths was preventable. Basic antibiotics would have saved them. Even simple wound cleaning would have dramatically improved survival rates. They died from medical ignorance, not from the metal itself. But their suffering created the foundation for modern international law. Article 3 of the Geneva Conventions doesn't just ban torture, it specifically prohibits the types of mutilation that devices like the Spanish tickler inflicted. Legal scholars directly cite 16th and 17th century torture records when interpreting these protections. So here's my question for you. We've covered the Spanish tickler, but medieval Europe had dozens of torture devices. Which one should I investigate next? The brazen bull? The pear of anguish? The Judas cradle? Drop your vote in the comments below. And if you want to see what history tried to bury, subscribe now because we're just getting started.